Clay. This is an episode of Star Trek Voyager that has the fans up in arms about a certain decision, and I have to know your opinion right off the start about this decision. Was Tuvix the right name as a portmanteau, or should it have been Tuvok?
Oh, Tuvix 100%. Also,
not just for brand difficulties with Reebok and Tuvok or something as he's dunking.
Tuvix sounds like one of those medications that you buy on TV.
I think it sounds like a candy. It sounds like Twix to me, almost.
I would not want to eat a chocolatey Tuvix. I'm also
got that
disappointed.
Wonderful chocolatey complexion, though.
I'm also disappointed you didn't start the show the way Tuvix gets everybody's attention by just going, sex! Now that I have your attention.
Janeway's appalled by that, too. She, excuse me?
Yeah, she's, now?
We did it. We made it to Tuvix. It's episode 24 of the second season of Star Trek Voyager. It came out on May the 6th. Be With You, 1996. Teleplay goes to Kenneth Baylor. Story credit goes to Andrew Shepard Price and Mark Gaberman. Directed by Cliff Bull. And universe date 49655.2, which is 2372. In this one, after a transporter malfunction, Tuvok and Neelix are merged into a single being called Nevok. In the search for a way to restore them to their original forms, a moral dilemma is faced as the new being does not want to be terminated. They wanted you to know right from the little blurb that there's a moral dilemma in the episode. The other important thing about this is that Tuvix should have worn his Neelix-inspired Starfleet outfit the entire episode instead of abandoning that thing.
Yeah, his
Persian rug.
His Cosby uniform.
Yeah, that would have given him a little bit of spark. I like the fact that they actually merged the uniform, like the clothes that the two of them were wearing when it happens at the start. I thought that was cute. Unfortunately, he doesn't keep wearing it. I guess because you'd wonder about the laundry situation, as apparently months have passed over the course of this. Am I off?
Has it been months? I think it's been weeks.
Weeks.
Or a couple of weeks or something.
Yeah, they mentioned some sort of timeline. Maybe weeks would make more sense. So Tuvix. It's kind of a controversial episode, I guess, although it skews largely positive. I looked up. I'm kind of unsure about this episode because I don't think I'd ever seen it before. I know the reputation for it. And I was not sure if I was misremembering what the reputation is for it, but it's highly rated on IMDb. The reviews for it are mostly positive, and I think our patron comments are going to be mostly positive about it too. But it's one of those things that I guess comes down to the end, which I don't know if we want to talk about right off the start, or we can just talking about what's probably undeniably the best part of the episode, which is that Tom Wright is the actor who plays Tuvix in this one, and he is probably, at least in my world, better known as Mr. Morgan from Seinfeld, which is the coworker of George's that George says looks like Sugar Ray Leonard, and he says, "I bet we all look alike to you, Costanza." I think his performance is almost Emmy Award winning in this. You might need to know if you're an Emmy voter what the context of what characters he's combining to understand what he's done here. But I thought he did a really fantastic job of mixing together Tuvok and Neelix in terms of performance.
Yeah, I did too. I think his makeup is a little...
He's disgusting.
He's really gross.
He looks horrific. I can't believe that Cass has any sort of emotional attachment to him whatsoever. He's a disgusting, disturbing looking person.
It's like, I don't want to say I wish they had made him look like better. Like if they had blended the two of them together and somehow like the design ended up making him like hotter, like he was Stefan Urkel or something.
Well, his personality is an 11 out of 10. They should have just made him. They should have gone with the Stefan Urkel. They didn't. It's too bad.
Yeah, no, he's really good. I loved this episode. I thought it was really great.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I knew the reputation. I knew it had a reputation, but I didn't really know which way it skewed. And when it first happened, when he first steps out of the transporter, I went, "Oh no," because I thought it was going to be a fucking train wreck, based pretty much solely on the way that he looked, unfortunately, due to no fault of his own.
Yeah, it's his hair. His hair is awful.
The hair's rough. Yeah. But then as it was going on, I looked it up on IMDb as well, and it's got like a mid-7, which is usually pretty good for a TV show, like a long-running TV show.
It's one of the best of the season, I think. It was maybe in the like top 3.
And I had to look it up because I was like, in my mind, I thought, oh, people don't like this one. And then I was like, this is a pretty good episode. This like the moral dilemma is about as intense as you can probably come up with for something that just deals with the crew members on the ship. And I mean, that ending, oh my God, that like, this might, if what's his name? Who, the actor, Tuvix actor?
Tom Wright.
If Tom Wright didn't get an Emmy nomination, I think Kate Mulgrew should have got an Emmy nomination. I think she's fantastic in this episode.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I think
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the scene with her and Kess, I think she kills it. And like, no pun intended. And the last scene when she walks out into the hallway right before it ends, amazing. Where she like looks like she's about to break down into tears, and then she just like steels herself up and walks on. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's probably her best performance episode, I think, for Mulgrew. Even ones that have focused on her a little bit more. She doesn't probably have the chance to emote the way that she does here. She's a little bit restrained. Like, it is pretty much tied down to that whole fact of like she has to do what she has to do, but then she feels bad about it, but then she has to steel herself and continue on with her day or whatever. Yeah, she's good. I think Kess is good in this one.
Yeah, she's really good. Yeah.
I sort of had like, I think all the acting is really strong in this one. I think that everyone is pretty good. It's going to be a tough episode because I also really like this one, and I could probably easily say it's the Voyager episode that I thought about the most after it was over. Like I was sort of befuddled by it, in a good way, and I think that it's really it's really neat. It's an interesting twist on the transporter double someone, which has happened a bunch of times in Star Trek before this, and this one combines somebody, so it's kind of a novel take on that whole thing. I think that what's really interesting about it is ultimately kind of how it exposes what I think is maybe to this point Voyager's biggest weakness too, unfortunately. But outside of that, while I was watching it, I really enjoyed it. I thought things were pretty good. I didn't have much to complain about. And it does a lot to make you actually care about... I think it all comes down to Tom Wright. I think that his performance makes you actually care about this horrific chocolate monster thing that you're staring at for 40 minutes of the episode. Because he's so likable and so like pleasant to watch outside of the way that he looks. And the thing where, like, when he's at the very end, when he's sort of like running around on the bridge saying like, someone help me, she's going to kill me. It's genuinely kind of sad for him as a character. You know, it's like you feel bad for Tuvix.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like, that's the key to it working, right? Is Tuvix being likable and you warming to him as a character, which is, again, baffling why they didn't make him more pleasant to look at.
I'm looking at a picture of him now. Even his like red eyes, his like blood red eyes.
Oh, the eyes. Yeah, the eyes are really off-putting. It's a rough, like, and the first time he like turns and smiles at Kess, like she gives him a response where it's like, no, that was the appropriate response. That is terrifying.
Yeah. He's not someone you want showing up at your quarters after midnight or something like that, ringing the bell.
But yeah, I mean, you know, it has to work in that way, because if Tuvix kind of sucks, then, you know, there's really no pathos there when they eventually have to get rid of him.
Yes.
But yeah, the acting is really great, and I think everybody reacting to him is really great too. The you know, one of the more heartbreaking scenes is that scene on the bridge where everybody's just kind of standing there not doing anything, and you feel it's like it really makes you think about what who these people are really, like that nobody on that bridge is making a an appeal to Janeway that maybe this is the wrong decision, and they all these people who claim to be his friends are now just, nope, we get it, we're just going to let this happen. And it's really rough. And I mean,
yeah,
the whole ending, oh man, my favorite detail in the whole episode is when they go into sickbay at the end and the doctor recuses himself.
Yeah,
because he can't. That was amazing, fantastic, great detail. Yeah, it's just really well done, really well laid out. And in the cold open, I thought they used really well to give you a little bit of insight into both of those two guys' characters.
They're hunting for orchids or something on the planet.
Yeah, and they're having the conversation about, whether or not Tuvok is allowed to enjoy a pleasant day doing the things that he likes to do. Like it's a conversation about nothing, but it's a conversation about everything with those two guys, because it's really laying out the differences of who these two guys are before they blend them together into this new third person.
Yeah. Tuvok says, "How can I be less or more like myself today?" Is the question that he has, and then obviously the sci-fi premise proves how that's possible.
Yeah, I just thought it was really well done. Makeup aside, everything else was really good.
Yeah, he's It's hard to not everything outside of the sort of issues that I have with it. I think it's a kind of a neat episode, and I think that the performances are excellent. I think that the concept is really strong. I think where it runs into trouble is sort of justifying itself, I guess. So like, I'm kind of sensing a trend with the Voyager episodes, which is that they'll get to this point where, and it's a trope that kind of bleeds into Enterprise and all the Star Trek that comes after it, where they don't feel that they have to explain what is going on. And I think sometimes it's not entirely obvious what's going on with their sort of like what they think the conundrum is here. This to me is really, it's just the psychological trolley problem, which is that famous experiment about if you give people an example of there's a train on a track, and at a Y in the tracks, it can go one of two ways. And it's either going to hit one person on the left track, or it's going to go to the right track and it's going to hit 5 people. And you have to decide what you want to do in that situation. And all the variables of that experiment are, you're just watching, like, what's the right thing that you hope happens? There's like, you're given certain examples of like, you're allowed to pull a lever that will divert the train to either hit one person or a bunch of people. What do you do in that situation? Mm-hmm. And then people have different responsibilities to, okay, well, you're on a bridge over the train, and to stop the train, you have to push like an extremely fat person off the bridge and block the train, right?
Right.
And what's interesting is that even though the outcomes remain the same for things, people are unwilling to stick to what they think the better outcome would be. So basically their choice about the best outcome is driven by how much they have to personally involve themselves in getting to that. And so it's this psychological thing about like, we're not really objectively looking at what the best outcome for things are. We're more interested in how we perceive our own role in the situation, and that somehow changes the algebra, like the ethical algebra of what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And that's really what this episode is. I find it's not. They even kind of mentioned it in the episode where they're like, if we had just had the solution right from the start, we would have just split them and no one would have cared anything about this.
Right, yeah.
And the only confounding variable is that you're basically, in my opinion, you're saving 2 lives by ending 1. And that seems justifiable to me. It's really just what they're doing is they're sort of muddying the waters by having Janeway to have to be the person who pushes the button that does it to him. And I think that that's all well and good. I'm just a little bit surprised by how much of the episode is spent on, even though I like the scenes with it, the stuff with Kes feels like a little bit of a distraction because it goes on for too long. And the other just problem that ties in with the sort of muddying of the water is that it's another Voyager episode where I don't feel like anyone really talks about what their different points of view are in here. And my final thing before I throw it to you is that I was reading one review, which I did not realize at all as it was happening, but I kind of strongly agree with, which is that the splitting of Tuvix should have happened in the end of the fourth act. And then you talk to Tuvok and Neelix about what they think about what happened in the fifth act. And that's how the episode ends. Because they don't have a point of view, and it would have been interesting, and you probably could have even shown Tuvok to have said Janeway did the right thing, but the more emotional Neelix to say, how could you kill somebody for this type stuff? And I think that it ends in a way where it just kind of, it does the split, it hits the emotional beats, but I ultimately don't really understand fully why Janeway made the choice she made, beyond the fact that you have to get your regular cast members back. And I think that's kind of a problem for it, because even though I think it all emotionally lands and it makes sense, and like getting connected to Tuvix is basically like they named the cow that they were going to turn into the cheeseburger at the end of the episode. That all works for me, but I really don't think that Janeway is put through the ringer in a way that feels to me like she's not just choosing what needs to happen at the end, if that makes sense. I talked for a long time. You can respond to any of that, I guess.
Well, I would say the thing that makes it different to me than the standard trolley problem is that it's like the trolley problem if there's one track and you run over two people, and in the killing of those two people, a new person is born.
Yep.
And so then you have the decision of, do you move forward with the new person, or do you get the two people back, which requires the killing of the new thing? And I think
but isn't it still just it's still whether or not you're killing two people or one, isn't it, ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the thing that's baked into it, though, is like Tuvix's entire argument is that you're not neither Neelix or Tuvok are really dead. Like he exists as both of them.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure, you could chalk up to being a fairly selfish way to look at it. Well, I mean, I don't know. I think it's arguably selfish all around, depending how you want to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, not to interrupt, but I think the weirdest, most almost like disturbing part is that I was thinking, like, if you had two friends who died and became one person that was a new thing, but you liked that new thing better than the two friends that you had originally, is a weird... Like, not that it couldn't be emotionally true, but it's like it makes you feel kind of icky thinking about it.
Sure. And I mean, I think that's one of the things that I love about the episode is that you do think about it and you do feel icky about it. And I think everybody on the episode kind of feels icky about it. But there isn't, I will agree that there isn't anybody aside from Tuvix who is providing a counterpoint to it, who is one. There's not really any of the cast members who are like, you know what, maybe this isn't the thing we should do because of X, Y, and Z.
Weekly, doctor, like the doctor at the end is Weekly does.
Yeah, he doesn't really count though. Yeah. You need someone who's like another human to occupy that space, because the doctor at the end of the day, you can whittle him down to cold logic or whatever you need him to be.
Well, I think his point is viable, right? That he's like, I pledge to do no harm, right? And I will do harm to. You run into the trolley problem. There is like it's like pure hedonism. It's like, are you generating more goodness by having two people who are happy or one person who's happy? So like that's the doctor's thing, I guess. Kind of his point in a roundabout way.
Yeah, I think the thing that they do dip into that is more wide, that brings the circle wider than the trolley problem usually does, is they take into account how this is going to affect all of the other people in Tuvok and Neelix's life.
Yeah.
So it's the survival of one person versus the trauma and pain of many, many other people, not just the two people who are now gone.
Right.
And I think, while the doctor does present this, the fact that, he can't, it would be causing harm, obviously, to kill him against his wishes. That's great. That's a great detail, but it doesn't get to the more personal aspect of the whole thing. And I think that's where the trolley problem doesn't totally line up for me, because so much of what they talk about this is entirely personal. Like, it's not cold calculation about what's better or worse. It is very personal about what they think is the right thing to do for them and for these other people and for Tuvix. And I think you in order to really get into that, you need to have someone else like Harry Kim or something who is actually on Tuvix's side. But ultimately, I think that's the problem with this is, like, realistically, were this to happen on Voyager, there's a good chance that this would be like a civil war causing event.
Yeah.
Where, like, if Janeway fucking executed this guy, even if it was to bring back Tuvok and Neelix, there's going to be a subset of people who think that is absolutely the wrong decision to have been made and might not be able to look at her the same way.
Yeah. Right.
Or anybody else. Or, like, this is not a conversation that's going to go away. The first time they go to get lunch, when Neelix is making food again and the food sucks, there's going to be one person to be like, hey, that was pretty fucked up, huh? And they're like, well, no, I think it was the right thing to do. And then it's going to turn into, like, it's going to drive a wedge between people.
Yeah.
And I think while I do think that would have been really interesting to have Tuvok and Neelix kind of get a little bit of a debrief about everything, I think that's kind of occupying the same space as what I'm saying, because there just isn't someone there to be on Tuvix's side other than Tuvix.
Yeah.
And the thing I was thinking, I was like, man, there's so much that I would want to know about this that we're never going to know. Like, did either of them have memories of what just happened?
Yes.
Like, do they remember being Tuvix? Like, do they have memories of this third person? Are they aware that this was the way that he was aware of them? Are they aware of him and are dealing with the fact that this third person that they ostensibly was also them was killed? There's a lot of stuff to get into there that's really kind of interesting territory, but I'm assuming they're never going to.
No. I would actually, I would think that if they remember him, it's actually less of a sacrifice, interestingly, because at that point it feels like he's not really an individual person because he was just kind of them,
Yeah, but I think that's tough to parse out and say that it doesn't still feel like a sacrifice, because it's still, at the end of the day, it was in the way that Tuvok and Neelix were gone, now he is gone, and he still was a third independent being that has ceased to exist. So yeah. I think that it's still, I don't know if it really sweeps that stuff under the rug that much.
It's weird though. What if he was, instead of being the best parts of Tuvok and Neelix, what if he was the worst parts of it?
Sure.
You would feel that doing this was not the wrong thing to do, to get rid of him, to bring back the other two.
I think you're right, and I think that's very interesting, actually, but I don't think that will. So I think that becomes a different conversation, right? Because I think in that case, you do end up having another character or a number of characters who argue in favor of Tuvix if he sucks, because, the way that the story of the television storytelling works in, like, a sci-fi thing is, like, when the fly shows up, you have to eventually get rid of the fly. And it's, even though Brundlefly is a new creation, they still have to kill it because it sucks.
Right.
And if you're going into this the way that Star Trek handles this stuff, even if Brundlefly sucked, there's going to be someone on that ship who goes, well, wait a minute, we just created a new species that has never existed before. We can't just kill it and get rid of it. Like, right. We can't kill it because we don't like it. And, that's not a conversation they ever have, because obviously Tuvix is cool. But I think there is missing from the conversation that side of it where someone needs to go to bat for him, but again, I think that the tough thing about that is if Harry Kim goes to bat for Tuvix, and at the end of the episode is upset that Tuvix is now dead, then how does Harry Kim
recover by next episode?
Right? Yeah, like he go back to playing the clarinet, I guess.
Yeah, sadly, an oboe at this time, just wah wah wah. Yeah, because I wonder if like. Because I think what's interesting in that I think it's fundamentally my problem with it is that the reason I find these kinds of things that Voyager does frustrating is that when it brings up an idea like this, which is a really good idea and it has a lot of different applications and a lot of different ways that you can go with it, I feel that the show does what Enterprise will eventually do, which is just to like shirk any responsibility. And what it eventually becomes is that in contrast to its earlier sister shows, Voyager and Enterprise tend to treat the thing that happens is more interesting than the outcomes of the thing that happens. So, like, the Voyager show is very interested in Tuvix is now this new person, and this is how he interacts with the crew. But it's less interested in what does this kind of mean for everyone around them in a way that's actually meaningful to the story. So, like, Second Chances is a good example because, like, in Second Chances, Riker gets his clone, right? But he gets through that, like, the whole symbolism of the episode is that Riker gets to meet the man that he was in his past, and he gets to sort of like grapple with like how far he's changed and how his life could have gone and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Tuvix is more about the event that happens, and there has to be a solution to it. But the discussion around that is really kind of weak, and it doesn't like. What's so successful about this episode is that the fact that you get such an emotional response out of what Janeway does is all the more kind of frustrating to me that there is not a great conversation leading up to her decision to do this thing. So, yeah, it's hard to describe. I think that the reason that like if Tuvix was an asshole, I think it's actually would have forced the script to have to talk about it more. Right, because they would be like the characters would be like, "This guy sucks. I can't wait till we get a solution to get rid of him." But someone at that point, you would have to imagine on the show would say, "I know he sucks, but we can't just kill him because he sucks." You know, that's the wrong thing to do. But because he's a good guy, you have the exact same story, and you feel bad for him when he dies. But ultimately, I don't think like the algebra really changes in what they're doing. So. It's the most interesting part about the trolley problem is that your perception of how you think about what's happening depends on what's leading up to the outcome, which is kind of neat. But I just wish Voyager talked about this stuff. Like the characters just don't have conversations that amount to good, interesting discussions. The closest this one gets is the roundabout Kes and Janeway discussion. You know, It's like it's kind of on point, but not really. It's not exactly what we're talking about, but it's kind of in the same line. And I don't know. And I do really like this episode, but I'm sensing a trend with how Voyager handles these things. And I don't think that the earlier shows like TNG and DS9 would always default to this thing of just saying, this is the event that happens. Here's the solution. Because those shows felt like they were much more interested in like the sort of the allegory, I guess, for lack of a better word, about how those things would work together. Yeah. The thing that's interesting about that Janeway and Kes scene is that I think you can almost kind of read that as the driving factor of what eventually she decides to do. Yeah. But yeah, I think if you do that, it makes it all very complicated, which is nice. I like that it's morally complicated and emotionally complicated. It's the best part of the episode is that it doesn't seem particularly clear what the outcome should be here.
Right. You know, and I think honestly the thing hindering this from really becoming, I mean, it is very effective. Like all said and done, it is very effective.
Yep.
But like, I think one of the things that maybe that reviewer was kind of not directly cluing in on is that like a lot of things that they've done in the season, because of the nature of the show, everything's back to normal by next week.
Yes.
And so like you can't, if I wonder if the reviewer would have had that same read on it if next week they were still talking about this, but they're not, right? So I think like in order for this to really get everything you'd want out of it, I think if it was a serialized show, like a more heavily serialized show, and they did like 4 episodes with Tuvix and then they fucking kill him, like that, that's really intense. Like then you really get into the meat of what's going on.
Yeah.
But because of the episodic nature, I mean, like you have to set it back to one, which is the blessing and the curse of episodic TV.
Well, yeah, and I guess that the thing off of that is like the reviewer's larger point kind of off of that, and what I think a lot of people would say is the problem is that Janeway's decision here is driven by reverting itself to the status quo of Voyager by the next week. Like Tuvix and Tom Wright are not cast members on this show. So we have to get back to a point where Tuvok and Neelix are back together. And I think people think that Janeway's decision is wrong, and the reason that she makes it is because the show has to do this. I actually kind of disagree with that. I think Janeway makes the right decision here in like a purely hedonistic thing of like 2 are better than 1, sort of that sacrifice. So I don't really hold it against her there. I think that it's like, it's almost like too much. It would be nice to break it out into more episodes just because it almost feels like it's too much stuff for one episode of Star Trek. But because the other conflicting thing that's happening is that Spock's the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few is what fuels Janeway's decision here, I think, right? Like getting the 2 back is better than the 1. This is like it's like dividing it down to the smallest possible numbers that you can deal with and say that 2 things are better than 1, or like two are the more and the 1 is the singular or whatever. But it runs into Star Trek's other principle, which is generally that it's like the very like classical liberal, like libertarian thing of like the individual is sacrosanct. Like we can't tell individuals what to do. Like you are on your own doing your own thing. So it's those two running into each other. And I just feel that it's pretty much like all of Starfleet's core beliefs are crashing into each other. And it just ends with Janeway getting very serious and pressing the button, and it resets the episode back to where it was going. And it's frustrating, but I still appreciate what Janeway did. I think she made the right decision. I just don't know I wish the show had done a better job so that people wouldn't have the out of saying, oh, it's just because the status quo had to be brought back, that's why that happened at the end. I think there is an argument for what she did, and I wish the show just had voiced her, made her a little bit more like just outspoken in what she was doing. Like I feel Janeway needs an explanation to the crew about what's going on, and to something beyond just I'm the captain, arrest this man, bring him down to sickbay, I'll push the button.
Well, that's what's so interesting about it though, is like the crew doesn't need an explanation. They are all on board with it. You know, like as much as they like this guy, he's the guest that's overstayed his welcome, kind of, you know?
Yeah.
Even though he never really overstayed. Like they never have a part where it becomes a downside to him. Excuse me. And I think that's part of probably why they play it this way instead of making him someone that sucks, is because I think part of the thing that is meant to make it difficult is that Tuvix is essentially better at what he has to do than Tuvok and Neelix are separately.
Yes, yeah.
Because of, you know, the blending of them together. It makes Neelix a better cook, and it makes Tuvok a better
he has Tuvok's work ethic with Neelix's subtle charm. Like he smooths the rough edges of both of them into a more palatable person.
Yeah, which is really interesting, because I mean, then you do get a bit of an argument in there. It's like, well, in this, I think part of what makes this so interesting is in that conversation that Janeway has with Kes. She starts talking about, like, is there a chance? The thing that she deals with is grappling with whether or not there's a chance she's ever going to get home and ever going to see her husband or whoever again, or is this just it? Is this the rest of our lives? In which case, I think the argument can be made that if you believe that this is it, then maybe killing him is the wrong move.
Yeah.
Because if it is just localized to Voyager, there's really no downside to letting this guy live, because it's kind of the best of both worlds, at least as far as someone who exists and not taking into account the the Kes of it all, really.
Yeah.
More Kes than anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if there is a glimmer of hope that they're going to get home and they're going to get out of here and there is going to be a future beyond the walls of Voyager for them, then you could argue that's the selfish way to look at it, but it is worth debating. And I think Janeway making the decision that she does is her actively saying, no, this is not the end. This is not how things are going to be.
Right.
And, and I think you can definitely view that as, oh, well, they have to set things back to 1 because this guy's not coming back next week, which is totally fine. Cause you do.
Yeah.
That's just how these things work. But I think it is really interesting where she is making this decision in a very cold and calculated, but like in a very cold and efficient military kind of way.
Yeah.
Considered. And while it does seem like a horrible thing to do, she's actually doing it out of actually having hope for where they're going to end up.
Yeah.
And it's what makes it all so deliciously complicated. And, that final scene, I think when she walks out afterwards is just, bullseye with the acting. But I do wish that they had more room to, kind of talk about it. And it's,
do you think they spent too much time with Kes in the Neelix ness of it?
I don't know. It's a tough call because she's kind of like representative of everything outside the ship to a certain extent, because she and Neelix theoretically have a life together beyond Voyager, and now they do not. And so she kind of becomes representative of the larger thing where it's like, okay, well, this is sure, it's both of these guys, but it's also neither of them at the same time. And so it's not like Tuvix is going to fly back to Vulcan and just shack up at Tuvok's house and start hanging out with his kids and stuff.
Well, Tuvok has obviously been writing some steamy Vulcan love letters to Janeway, who's reading them at night in her quarters.
And so I think it's an interesting angle. I think they could have dialed back on a bit to give a little bit more room to. I mean, honestly,
it's also
would have kind of been
Neelix
interesting.
Is the problem. Before you get to it's like Tuvok has no personal in with anybody. They try it with Janeway, right? Like they try to stay like Tuvok and I wrote letters, and I was just like, I've been friends with Tuvok for a long time. You go, okay, this is not great. Kes and Neelix are apparently in a relationship with each other, right? And it's like the dramatization suffers a little bit because Neelix, weirdly. Like, it doesn't. If it was someone like Tuvok, it makes a little bit more sense and you feel a little bit more pathos. But Neelix is such like a comically unserious character that he damages that a little bit, because while Janeway and Kes, at least in my opinion, while they're having this heart-to-heart, I'm just picturing Neelix's 50% opacity face like hovering above everything, and it's just like, oh, God, they're talking about him. It's unfair, and it's not... I know Kes as a character is not supposed to feel that way, the way that I feel about him, but it's a tough spot to be in. It would be easier if Tuvok was the character that was allowed to have relationships.
Yeah. It's funny. I did get a hint of what the hell is that Deep Space Nine episode? The future suave Odo and the one where they crash and it's like
Children of
300
Time.
years.
Children of Time. Yeah.
The future Children of Time Odo
With
talking
his
to
unbuttoned
Kiro.
shirt. Yeah.
Yeah, when he's like, "Hey, baby, I've been waiting for you to come back," and she's like, "Get the fuck away from me."
Yep.
Like that. I got some of that in there, but I wonder if how it would have played out if the person who was arguing for allowing Tuvix to live was Cass.
Yes,
because
right.
she has her own personal viewpoints about what she's losing, but at the end of the day, she recognizes that this is still a person, whether or not it's the person she wants it to be.
Yeah,
and having her, who has the strongest emotional attachment to one of these two now gone people, be the one to advocate for Tuvix to survive, I think would have been a really interesting way to play it.
Yeah. Yeah,
because even Cass is kind of like got her eyes to the floor, being like, "Yeah, fucking kill this guy."
Yeah. She leaps over to press that button. The doctor can't do it. Yeah. It's I wish they.
I took no such oath. Button.
I'm just a nurse.
This is for not promoting me. Button.
Just a PA, he said. Just a PA. I kind of personally think they spend a little bit too much time with Cass. That's the stuff I would cut, and I understand why it's there. She is the one that humanizes him in a way that the others can't. Even though everyone just sort of likes him in vaguely the same way, you don't get the same conflict that the others do. That's what really brings it back to my ickiness factor, is that like people sort of, it's not weird, but they glom to him in a way that is like sort of unsettling about, as I was saying, like if you thought about this, if this actually happened, it feels kind of like a betrayal to the original two people that you just like this new thing so much. But they don't really get into that because no one really has a relationship with Neelix or Tuvok that they can feel bad about that kind of stuff. Like even Janeway isn't set up particularly well to do that here.
Yeah, and I'm curious. This is one of those episodes where the reaction, the viewer reaction, I can see being born out of not wanting to have to deal with the fact that they're acting so icky. Like, oh, Janeway, she absolutely made the wrong decision because of X, Y, and Z. So, well, is that true, or do you just not want to have Captain Janeway be a murderer?
Right.
Or it's the way it's absolutely the wrong decision. Blah blah blah. Okay, do you think is the reason you feel that way just because you don't want to sit with the fact that the crew of Voyager kind of
sold out Tuvok?
Kind of sold this guy out in both directions, where they all of a sudden, hey, it's great, we got a new guy on the ship, he's fantastic, and then when they were done with him, they threw him in the trash. Yeah. I mean, that's really, it's gross, and it requires a lot of unpacking, and I wonder if that's the negative reaction is born out of not wanting to have to unpack that gray morality for characters that are supposed to be quote unquote good guys. Yeah.
No, it's a good point. We'll see if any of the patrons bring it up. We have a lot of comments, so we'll get to them right now, but that's it for Tuvix, or at least our discussion of it. You can go to patreon.com/the Pensky File if you want to support the show. You get extra stuff for a couple bucks a month, more podcasts, all that stuff, and you also get to leave your thoughts about upcoming episodes. Sorry, I just became conscious of how tired my jaw is. It's like thinking about walking while you're walking, and all of a sudden you're overthinking it. I feel like my tongue is tied up in knots. So yeah, you can go to patreon.com/the Pensky File if you want to leave some thoughts. We'll read them aloud and respond to them if we believe them to be respondable too. So let's go to Clef first, which is Tuvix. Here Janeway stands next to a train track where the trolley's a radioisotope cell hack. This episode's vocal haters inform Sim Tucker's writing later. But I had to remember who Sim Tucker was. But was it worth Neelix to get Tuvok back? 5 awards that should be given to Kate Mulgrew out of 5.
Who's Sim Tucker? Is that the
clone of Tucker in Enterprise?
Okay.
Yeah. in similitude. This is Kyle Barrett. I will send it to you right now. Tuvix.
Tuvix. Voyager is often seen as a cozy, comfort Star Trek series, but not this episode, which is why it garners such strong opposing reactions. This episode is all about the ending, and I completely disagree with Janeway's decision. She executes a member of the crew, but that's why I like the episode so much. I don't understand the idea that thinking Janeway was wrong means the ending isn't good, a criticism that permeates in the fandom. Oh, there you go. I love that the show has the balls to take the darker, bolder path to choose the not very Starfleet option, and it's not accidental in any way. During that scene in the ready room, Janeway is played as a villain, sneering and leering down at Tuvix, showing a conscious choice from all involved in how she would be presented. I love that the goofy premise leads to a genuinely heartbreaking episode, and it begs the question, would losing Tuvok from the show be an acceptable loss if Neelix also left? 4 brilliant guest star performances out of 5. You know, that's really interesting because I feel like they give Janeway a lot of like she has so much emoting to do. Like that, like I was saying, the scene with Cass, she's really, really great in it. And she is a little bit more warm and a little bit more approachable, I think, in this episode. And I think it is probably to offset the way that she has to act at the end. So she's not just kind of cold the whole episode and then she's extra cold at the end.
Yeah. In that case, should Tuvix have spent less time with Cass and more time with Janeway through the course of things?
That's tough. I don't know. Maybe. I think it makes the end.
Makes the ending harder.
If they spend too much time together, the ending seems even more awful.
Yeah. Yeah,
because then it's like, yeah, you're really great. Thanks for coming by, but put this gun in your mouth, please.
Yeah, it's the I'm interested in because I think a lot of people would agree with Kyle that's Janeway's decision is wrong. I guess where do you like? Does she make the right decision at the end of the episode? Do you think? I think she does. Like I think that's I think she makes the right choice here in terms of it's really just a pure you're getting 2 for the breaking 1 egg, which feels to me that is like you're doubling the amount of possible happiness almost. Like happiness is a weird way to think about it, but the amount of like possible experience is being doubled, and that seems better. There's sort of the episode is not trying to do this, but there's some sort of like, and I'm glad they didn't, but there's some sort of like really clumsy abortion allegory to be made through what they decide here. The episode wisely sidesteps it, but it's that kind of it's like, at what point does the loss of 1 reward the existing 2? And I'm a little bit surprised by the people who would say that Tuvix being executed in this sense, or Tuvix being removed from the universe in the way that he is I guess what makes it just the fact that he has to disappear is the wrong thing, I guess. I don't understand the counter argument, so I can't do a good job justifying it. It's just I guess the argument is just murder is wrong. He's an individual. So even if you are increasing other people's potential happiness, to kill this person is the wrong thing to do. I don't know where you fall on that.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's a coldly logical way you can parse this out, because it really does come down to how you feel about it emotionally. Because I mean, if we looked at it differently, where it was like, okay, Tuvok and Neelix go down to this planet, and while they're there, they discover a child who they attempt to save, and in the saving of this child, they both get killed. And so now the child's back on Voyager, or it doesn't have to be a child, person, whatever.
Yeah, person.
And while the person is on Voyager, after a while, they realize if we kill this person, we can bring back Tuvok and Neelix.
Yeah.
what is the answer there? Like that's
well, I think there's an interesting distinction there actually though, and it's important to this episode, is that what happens to them, to Tuvok and Neelix, is not their decision to happen, right? So they're not actively working on something that will combine them and it results in this. So like,
sure,
they don't have, and in the case of your saving the child, I would assume that they would choose to save the child and die in sacrifice for that child. Basically, that's like the way I'm reading between the lines. Mm-hmm. And that seems to me like at that point, they made their decision. So you can't get to redo them. But Tuvix is different because neither of them meant for this to happen, and it was a complete accident.
Sure.
You know, it's a weird twist on the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, taking into account if that is how it worked, if it was an act of sacrifice on their part, yes, I think that would be definitely the wrong decision to reverse what they chose to do. But if you took that element out of it, and let's say they didn't know that was going to happen,
sure,
I think it gets very difficult. And I think the thing that makes this I think the length of this sucks, but I think the length of time in existence softens the blow a bit. Because I mean, like you said, she says that outright. She's like, if we could have figured out how to do this the same moment, we would have done it, no questions asked.
Yeah, that's the abortion allegory, right?
Yeah,
that's like the timing of that stuff. Yeah, it's weird. I guess Tuvix doesn't become more of a person. He just grows on you. I guess you get to know him and you start to like him. But it is, as you were saying, it's if they had just done this right from the start and he didn't step off the transporter pad, it doesn't feel as bad as for some reason as once you get to know him.
Right. Yeah.
You read that one. I'll read Taxel Bear, possibly one of the most well-known and most discussed Voyager episodes. It does feature a Kobayashi Maru scenario of sorts, a situation where there's no clear-cut best choice to be made. What I found most interesting was a comment Janeway makes that right after the transporter incident, the separation of Tuvix probably would have been acceptable to everyone, even though Tuvix was basically the same person he is later, with the only difference being no attachment to the crew. Good Star Trek content overall.
Yeah.
And then this one's short. I'll read it. Eric McGowan says, I never understood how fans could hate this episode or unironically called Janeway a war criminal. It's always struck me as Trek fans being intentionally obtuse. The warden from Shawshank Redemption. The episode was intentionally written to present an ambiguous moral quandary, and it delivers on just that. Tuvix is an excellent episode that really does make you think about the right course of action and what it should have been. 5 out of 5.
I don't, it's one of those things where, like, honestly, I don't know if there is a right answer when you take into account all of the angles.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there needs to be one. Like, it can, thankfully, as far as we know, this is never going to happen.
Yes. Yeah, we can hope.
And, listen, I'm gonna have egg on my face when I'm wrong in about 10 years when they develop this technology. But
I was thinking, if like, what if this applied to us, right? And we're doing this podcast, and I took you, who I'll say is like the Tuvok of this, and I took like I don't know who this person would be, but there must be a YouTube commenter who annoys me more than anybody, and we combined the two of you, but it like smoothed you out into the greatest podcast co-host. And I felt bad that the show was doing so well when I amalgamated the two of you into this new thing.
Listen, I'm insulted to hear that I need smoothing in order to become the greatest podcast host of all time.
Well, no one thought that Tuvok would be a better tactical chief if he had a little bit of emotion to it, but apparently he is, and you can tell. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did I copy this? I'll send it to you. Did I? I did.
But just to round out what I was saying a minute ago, it's just like I don't think there is, I don't know if there is a right answer, but I mean that's one of those things where I think that's what makes it so compelling. Is because you could talk about this till the end of time.
Yes.
And never come away with a consensus between two people.
No, it doesn't shoot itself in the foot with its argument, I think, which is important. Like, I think there's a lot of Star Trek arguments where it tries to make a point, but it fucks up one argument so badly that you go, well, it's clearly the other choice is the option here.
Yeah, like this is a lot. This isn't Vulcan mind meld AIDS, you know?
No, there's a lot more clarity to what's going on here. Yeah, I just Yeah, I feel strongly. I guess I admit that, like, I understand and admit that, like, there is no clear answer, and it's sort of a like debate about whether or not you would do it. But I do find I find myself just strongly disagreeing with the Janeway makes a wrong decision. So I'd be interested if people have.
Sure.
I know Kyle has a different opinion. He didn't really flesh it out, much like the Voyager episode itself. He didn't flesh it out as an argument. This is Jonathan
Gauntlet thrown.
This is Jonathan J.K. Morris. I just sent it to you.
Tuvix. Everyone argues over ethical issue of what Janeway should have done. Either kill Tuvix or not. It's a false choice. The easiest and ethical solution would be to separate the two men first, get their consent to use the procedure that created two Rikers. Then you'd have two Tuvoks and two Neelixes for a quick second. Then merge one of the Tuvok-Neelix pairs to create Tuvoks a second time. Thereby having all three serving aboard Voyager. It's so simple, surprised it was overlooked by Mr. Pillar. Well, I actually was kind of thinking about something along those lines because I started thinking about, first of all, I don't think it's as simple as it seems because once you have two copies of Tuvok and Neelix, then you get into the question of, well, those two copies now have to
die. Someone has to die. Yeah,
and they have to consent to being spliced into a single part. So I don't think it makes it easier, but
it's just Janeway creating and killing people endlessly for the rest of the voyage.
That's definitely that's the Rick and Morty answer to it. Is that's what they would do? Yes. But I was thinking, I was like, after that whole thing happened, part of me was thinking, like, well, do we have any real consensus on how the transporter works? Because, like, if you have the Tom Riker scenario, there is some sort of shenanigans with whether or not your pattern is saved and all this kind of other stuff. Is like, is there not the possibility that you can just like use your backup disk to create
to come back?
To energize the last version of the pattern that you put through it.
It's like when you back up your computer and it saves the restore point.
Yeah. Or is part of the ethics of the technology, much like what they claim, Amazon claims Alexas do, is that they don't actually hold on to any of this data.
Right.
And so you can't do that. What I'm saying is, can you use the replicator to build a new Tuvix?
Because he's in the transporter beam. Yeah, just photocopy him, and he should be the same. That's the downside of the transporter.
Not to get more into how difficult the other suggestion would be, but then, like, now if you splice if you undo Tuvix and then you redo Tuvix, there's no guarantee it's going to be the same person.
Right.
So you might end up with Nuvok or whatever the hell.
Yeah, you'd end up with Nevok, I guess.
Nevok.
Which he should be the asshole version.
Yeah.
That'd be fine. And then see the hypocritical egg on all their faces when they kill one and not the other one.
I would have so much respect for this show, and it would be the only way I would want to see another Mirror Universe episode if they go to the Mirror Universe and there's no Neelix and there's no Tuvok, but there is an asshole Tuvix on the ship.
I'd be down. It's the last hurrah for the Mirror Universe. Real Avi says, Tuvix, how is this super dark screenplay ever approved? A great episode showing leaders sometimes have to be cruel and make tough decisions that are immoral on an individual basis, but morally right on a group or mission basis. I guess that's a good way of describing it. Yeah. I loved Mulgrews' acting here. Lots of nuance. He or she wrote nuisance in their eyes, nuance in their eyes, I think. And Janeway at the end putting on the icy persona so she can go ahead with what she did without cracking, followed by her swiftly leaving sickbay so that no one sees how tough this was for her. Lots to discuss and debate with this one, which to me is Star Trek at its best. 5 hybrid orchids out of 5. I didn't follow the whole flower conversation, whatever the fuck they were talking about there, but
yeah, they were. I think they were just trying to. You mean in the show? You're talking about
in the show. The original episode's title was Symbiogenesis. So Symbiogenesis was like the original title. So it felt like they were just trying to work that in.
Yeah, I think it was just trying to explain in the simplest terms the crossbreeding of the flower and how you can't undo that.
Mm-hmm. They're like, interestingly, the flowers come out beautiful.
Yes. Yeah.
They smell so nice.
Arguably better than the 2 flowers on their own. So, But yeah, it's funny. I've actually been I've been watching this British show from the 70s called Secret Army, I believe. I think that's what it is. I'm getting mixed up with my World War II stuff because I just bought Army of Shadows. So yeah, I believe this is Secret Army, and it's about Belgian resistance fighters in World War II.
Yeah.
And man, you want to see some shows about morally gray decisions that are affecting the needs of the many versus the needs of the few. Holy shit. Like this is an episode, this is a show that routinely will end with the just straight up killing of characters that they spent the whole episode trying to save just because they realize, oh, this guy's in the wind and he has information that can, if he gets captured by the Germans again, he knows who we are, so we have to kill him.
Yeah.
And it's like, it is cold as ice, and it is a really good show. But it's like, every time I watch it, I'm like, man, these are the heroes of the show. And this guy just went out on his own to assassinate this other dude. There's one episode where this young kid finds a RAF pilot hiding in a barn, right? And so he's been going to the RAF pilot, and he's kind of like helping him out and stuff. And his mother is trying to stay out of everything. She's like, I'm just keeping my head down, doing what I got to do. And there's this German soldier who has been coming over and kind of making not aggressively romantic, but he's clearly hanging out with her because he likes her.
Yeah, right.
And so this kid's helping out the RAF pilot, and the kid ends up finding the people in the Belgian underground who end up getting this guy out of there. But as a thank you, the RAF pilot gives the kid his like golden RAF medallion thing, and the mother finds it, and so she's like, you know what this means? I have to turn this guy. I have to tell the Germans that we have this, because if they find out you have it, they will kill you. I have to tell them that everything that you told me, or they will kill you. And so she goes out and she's on her way to the German barracks to tell them what's going on. And as she's doing that, the kid goes and finds the underground people and is like crying to them, telling them what he did, and he's so sad about it. And then the underground people fucking kill his mother.
Yeah.
And they like run her over with a car and make it look like an accident.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just this intense thing where it's like, it's the mother. This child is a single, all he has is his mom. His father was killed in the war or something like that. And like, they just coldly kill this woman to preserve the underground railroad essentially that they set up. And it's like, it's these intense moral decisions that have so many lives in the balance every episode. And it's a really compelling show.
Yeah. It's the, I mean, that's
spoilers for that episode.
Yeah, I'll go bleep all that. Spoilers: the Nazis lose. Yeah, it's the. I mean, Rhea had mentioned it, and it's that point that you're making there is like there's an interesting. The thing that the episode is getting at is like that great philosophical idea that like at a certain point the individual matters less than the cause, really, and it's like it's sad for that person. In a heroic sense, it's the Batman thing. It's like Wayne can die as long as like the symbol of Batman exists and like that lives on. It becomes more tragic when the person who has to die does not want to die, which is what happens in this episode. It happens in that the show that you were just talking about. But the outcome is still positive. That's like the cold Vulcan rationality of it, I suppose. Did I copy this? I'll send this to you. This is Atanga Udam with Tuvix.
Tuvix, a truly special episode, but probably by mistake. The premise is silly, the acting is awkward, and the orchid being fused into Tuvix's uniform pattern is ridiculous.
Is that the orchid, or is it just Neelix's clothing?
I thought it was just like a riff on Neelix's clothing, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
This episode would have been better served on TNG or DS9, but the core ideas of consent, identity, self-determination, and some good relationship stuff make it a classic. That said, the scene where Tuvix begs his crewmates for his life while they just watch is horrifying. Put me down for Team Janeway as a murderer, but don't forget the rest of this motley crew.
Interesting.
Four Snickers bars eaten with a knife and fork out of 5.
What is that? Oh, it's the Seinfeld reference. Excellent. Good job. Matt Ross says, Tuvix, the episode with a very controversial decision that I'm sure everyone will debate here and forever. What's more important is that when Tuvix first appears is that his uniform has a nice mix of Paisley and Starfleet combined, so that plant is also a great tailor with the transporter. I guess that, yeah, because the plant causes it or something, right? But yeah, my understanding was it's Neelix's clothing. Whatever. Was Janeway right or wrong? Probably a bit of both. A tough call, but Tom Wright, who played Tuvix, didn't have a long-term contract. 5 Paisleys out of 5. There's a lot of Tuvixes coming up on Control Find here. Tuvix, this is an infamous Star Trek episode for its ending, but I really liked it. It's a good moral dilemma. It doesn't take the easy way out at the end. I would rather have controversial than boring. That being said, I side with Janeway. Tuvix is not a person. He is an accident. If you get in a car wreck and woke up with new memories and a new personality, and if you were to be fixed, it would be effectively killing this new person, but it would be okay because it was all fake. Tuvix is a disease and Janeway's the cure for 6 out of 5. All right. I took you seriously for about 60% of that, but then you gave up on it. I appreciated your gusto. This is Aaron Million with this comment. Tuvix.
Tuvix, this is somewhat the opposite of The Enemy Within from TOS, with 2 people being merged into one being instead of one person split into halves. This season of Voyager has had a recurrent theme of death, and this episode really hits the mark. Kudos to Voyager for tackling a difficult subject at the end. Do you in essence kill one being to save 2 others? The 2 conversations that Kes has with Janeway in her quarters are what reminds me of why I like Star Trek to begin with, and why I dislike most of the new Trek. Good dialogue, solid acting, and taking a few minutes to discuss philosophical issues that are impacting the characters. This episode also does a wonderful job of showing the loneliness and stress of command on Janeway, as ultimately only she can decide who in effect lives and dies here. 5 plant specimens that should never be transported out of 5.
So what's interesting, right, is that like this episode is basically the same idea as what Sisko does in The Pale Moonlight, right? Except Sisko doesn't actually do anything that causes people to die in that, because Garrick exists in that show and Garrick can do it for him.
Right.
But I guess my philosophical point is, what's the difference when everyone accepts that what Sisko does not directly do but indirectly does is the right thing to do in that show than it is here, do you think? Is there a difference? I see them as the same. Again?
Sorry.
So like Sisko in Pale Moonlight feels remorse, but he accepts that like I would do that again because I had to kill a few people, but I saved the galaxy from this war that the Dominion are bringing to us by bringing the Romulans into the war. Mm-hmm. Janeway makes the same decision, but actively and on a smaller scale, right? She saves 2 by breaking 1 egg. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think the reaction to it is very different.
I don't know if Janeway thinks she did the right thing. I think you can argue that she has no fucking clue if she did the right thing.
Okay.
Like she has made her decision, but I think you can read into that final shot that she does have doubts. She's not entirely sure if she made the right decision.
Oh, see, I think that she feels bad, but she made it. So she's an interesting because. So you think she's the opposite of what Sisko says, which is that for all this is worth, I would do it again. That's what I've learned about myself from this. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting that Janeway goes in the opposite direction. I guess it's neat. It's strange to me, or interesting, or maybe it's all about setup, that I don't see the 2 as fundamentally different decisions. It's just that I think it's the trolley problem thing. I think people are actively actually upset with Janeway because she pushes the button that does it, which is neat, which is kind of an interesting difference between them. I don't know.
Yeah, like I think. I mean, the answer to this is obviously, but like, if Tuvix does it himself,
right,
that changes it's fine.
Yep.
And then it becomes noble.
Yes.
because, killing yourself for other people is noble for some reason.
Yeah, that would be the 5th episode this season that had to deal with that, though, I think.
Yeah, that's a concept that's very pervasive in American media that I think we need to move away from, is the noble suicide.
Noble suicide.
I think not that there isn't a place for those things.
In a lot of cultures, unfortunately.
Well, not that there isn't a place for that kind of action, but it's I don't know. It just seems like the most noble thing a person could do is kill themselves in hopes that, and maybe it's true, I don't know, but it's a weird thing to be so pervasive in media, is this idea that you're not a hero until you kill yourself.
Yeah. I mean, there's the disrespect is not knowing his name, that the monk that self-immolated in the famous picture. It's that kind of a thing, but that's also the self-sacrifice, but also a tremendous argument for like perception is everything, is what that is, like the mindfulness meditation is just about like, to be able to do that and really not show any weakness through the process is kind of incredible. Yeah.
Well, I think in real life, the instances where those things happen, it is difficult to really not have respect for it.
Yeah.
But like in media, in fictional media, like that's one of the things that bothered me so much about the third Nolan Batman movie.
Oh, like, I see what you mean.
Yeah. It's like Batman doesn't fulfill his destiny until he commits suicide on behalf of Gotham City. Like, come on, what? It
kind of symbolizes they don't need him anymore, right? I guess maybe, but yeah, it's a clunky. It's a I guess it's just the self-sacrifice. It's the opposite of what this is. What this episode is saying is just like the amount of good you do by paying the ultimate price is maybe sometimes worth it.
And like, I'm sure not to get the chocolate and the peanut butter here, but I'm sure there are people screaming
That's
at the
Tuvix's makeup, if you don't mind.
I'm sure people are screaming at their speakers right now, saying that's the entire point of Finn's arc in The Last Jedi is to get away from the idea that the sacrifice, the pointlessly sacrificing yourself does not make you a hero. But you also don't stop it by hitting somebody at terminal speed. So not going to start that argument again. But it's just, I don't know. It's always something that I've noticed so much in so many things.
Yeah.
And it's interesting.
Yep. Very common. Although they sometimes subvert it and the person doesn't die and still succeeds.
True.
Way.
Yeah.
Jakey's Gamer says, Tuvix, this episode has become a meme, but putting that aside, I really like the dilemma they gave Janeway here and the implication she'll have to live with her decision for a long time. That said, how's this for an alternate ending? The transporter materializes at the end and only Tuvok is left sitting there. Janeway looks down for a moment, back up, shrugs and says, it's fine too. The end. Goodbye, Mr. Neelix. We hardly knew you.
Also, I mean, they're kind of taking a big chance on this thing that they don't know if it's going to work.
Yeah, they haven't tested it. Yeah.
What if they Cronenberg this guy and he's just half of each of them screaming for 30 seconds until they both die? Then where are you?
Janeway just has to manually strangle them just to really get herself involved.
Screaming, I'm sorry at the top of her lungs.
Patrick Siva says, Tuvix, an ep about Neelix, I'm holding my breath with singing for scene. It worked for Macbeth. One thing I don't get, how his clothes just fit. But fuck it, Janeway just sentenced him death. 4 missed opportunities to have David Cronenberg guest direct out of 5.
There you go. Yeah, I was thinking the first thing I thought of was Star Trek The Motion Picture, which opens with the Doctor getting Cronenberg to death.
Yeah.
No, not the Doctor. Is it the Doctor? It's the Vulcan who's supposed to be on the ship, right?
Right, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he turns into a giant ball of goo. And I was thinking, I mean, I guess they must have improved technology since then, because clearly that's never happened since.
No, it's safer than flying. It's the safest form of transportation you can possibly have. Wes Derlin says, Tuvix, the episode Tuvix Must Die has probably been waiting years for you to cover it. Well, we got here. It's been a long podcast, too. It's been an hour and 15. This is a long one. I'm going to just send you half of it. I apologize, people, but I don't make the rules, and I did write the rules on the top of the thing. A few sentences is most helpful. This is Malo Perverso, with Tuvix.
Tuvix. I felt like they could have explored the transporter's capabilities more, like how it can duplicate people, Tom Riker, take organs out of people, Neelix's lungs, transport individuals through time and wormholes, Eye of the Needle, transport babies out of wombs, cure contagious diseases, Next Gen Season 2, Episode 7, fuse individuals, this episode, separate mixed species, Faces, store people inside the computer as files, Deep Space Nine, Season 4, Episode 10, bring people back from the dead, Scotty and Relics, etc. How come they couldn't just make a new Tuvok and Neelix from their last that's what I said.
Yeah.
From their last transporter scans. We could have had Neelix, Tuvok, and Tuvix as part of the crew, maybe maybe permanently.
We just need to add that great Nintendo 64 character, Turok, the dinosaur hunter, to these names.
Dinosaur hunter. Hell yeah.
Yeah. That's all we need. I apologize, Malo, but I do have the rules at the top of the Patreon about length. Girth, I'm all for, but not length. Norman Buckwald is the next comment. Tuvix is perhaps one of the most overrated episodes. Like the premise, particularly the dilemma introduced close to the ending, but the execution of the episode, let alone the quote-unquote execution itself, makes the Voyager crew seem ridiculously heartless. And I don't think they would be. One hybrid transporter accident out of 5. The lone descent. Norman, you're the person that Tuvix needed.
And see, that's interesting because, like, that's kind of what I'm saying. I mean, yes, it makes them look heartless, but that doesn't make it bad.
Yeah.
That just makes them, in that moment, heartless.
Yes,
which,
heartless.
Unfortunately, again, due to the nature of episodic TV, they will seem to continue to be because no one will ever talk about Tuvix ever again.
Yeah, and
I assume.
To Norman's point, it's like that's, to me, that's what's missing is that you can justify the heartlessness a little bit better to flesh out the episode, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Jaren Hatch says, if you thought Captain Janeway is scary in the thaw, oh boy, do I have the perfect episode for you. Alas, this episode is another case of Voyager I thought I read this before, is not quite being up to the task of fully exploring a great concept. The moral dilemma only comes up in the last act or so of the episode, which is not nearly enough time to adequately address or resolve it. Janeway and the security guards might as well be Rick Berman and the network executives dragging a wonderful idea to its death so that the sacred episodic nature of Voyager can be preserved. Kudos to actor Tom Wright, though. He makes the whole thing worth watching. 3.5 magical techno-babble orchids out of 5. And then point extra G. There's a lot of comments. We're making our way through. This is point extra G with Tuvix.
I wonder what they did with that mixed uniform that Tuvix beamed up in, because that thing was dope. While I really like the moral dilemma that Janeway faced, it's always undercut a bit by the fact that we know Neelix and Tuvok will be back at the end of the episode. I'd like to have seen explored what Neelix and Tuvok recalled of their time together and hear their thoughts on what Tuvix felt during it all, but that ending shot of Janeway quietly leaving sickbay is one of the best closing shots in all of Voyager.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's, you can't do everything, I guess.
No, you can't. We only have so much life to live unless you can double it. Grappler John Zorn says, I've never really understood the Janeway haters over this episode. If anything, she makes a gutsy, necessary decision for the benefit of her ship and crew instead of working towards another Starfleet merit badge. Of course, all of this is an improvement over the original draft titled Chakimte, which was dropped after no one in the writer's room could think of any believable reason to return those characters to normal. 4 out of 5. Let's see here. Nick the Rat with the next one. I'll send this over to you. Oop, copy.
Yeah, what is the worst combination of they could have done? Is that it? Is it Chakotay and Harry Kim?
I think it would be Neelix and Kim, I think.
Yeah.
Neelix and Kim is a pretty bad, or like Tom Paris and Kim. I think there's actually a lot of bad combinations. Tom Paris and Kim would be pretty boring too. Chakotay's in there too, definitely. The Chakotay one, the thing would just be saying all these, like, spewing all these horrible Native American sayings constantly, and that's what they would fall back on. But if you combine Tom Paris and Harry Kim, I don't even know what that thing talks about. he's like the mixer in an alcoholic drink. He's just like the orange juice and a screwdriver. Like he's there to make it bearable. He's softening it, but he's not really what you're there for in the first place.
Mixing Paris and Harry Kim. They would just talk about all the girls they almost scored with, but never scored with.
You need to write a mean clarinet solo about every single girl. This is Nick the Rat I just sent to you.
Tuvix. Ensign Kim said it best at the start of this episode. Abort! Kes should have been happy with the upgrade. The actor did a great job combining the two personalities, and wardrobe did a great job combining outfits. I was half expecting Tuvix to walk out of Janeway's quarters smoking a cigarette when Kes got there. I consider this to be one of Voyager's best. I think Tuvok and Neelix should have had a conversation before the episode ended, but still 5 transporter accidents out of 5.
Yeah. Artorius says, this episode makes you wonder what the decision would have been if they were back in Federation space, let alone with what another captain would have done. For all the people in the comment section saying this was done out of necessity for the ship, it wasn't. The only reason given was the desire to see 2 men return, not because they were necessary for the ship to function. If anything, I would argue the episode made the case Tuvix was better at both of their jobs. As to the question, I believe that life is owed to those whom it originally belongs. So I believe that life belongs to Neelix and Tuvok, as they were the original owners of the life that was Tuvix. Sorry, I think I said it wrong, but I got it right. Definitely a memorable episode, 5 out of 5. Yeah. Life belongs. I don't disagree. I'd have to think about it, but we'll just keep churning on here. Thank you, Artorius, for the comment. I think I agree. This is Cerulio. I will copy it and I will send it to you in Discord.
The first time I watched this episode, I knew Tuvok and Neelix would be returned to normal and Tuvix would be gone by the end of the episode, but I did not expect Janeway to actively choose to kill one to save 2 others. I assumed they would find a way to save them all with some Thomas Riker transporter nonsense, but it wouldn't work and Tuvix would die. Rewatching this episode really makes me appreciate how important 7 of 9 is to the show, since the Maquis fell into lockstep with the Starfleet crew after only a few episodes. When 7 joins the crew, she's an outsider who explicitly calls Janeway out for her hypocrisy in situations like this, where she tramples a person's rights for the advancement of the crew as a whole. I really wish Chakotay had filled that role in this episode, speaking up for Tuvix and trying to help get him off the ship, because it seems like it would be right up his alley as a former freedom fighter. 4 out of 5 species merged together. Yeah, so the one thing is, like, I really don't like it when the argument against something is, well, we know it's just going to be back to normal at the end of the show. Like, it's kind of the same problem I had with the when Infinity War came out, and everyone was like, well, I mean, we know they're coming back. Like, they're making another Spider-Man movie, so we know that they're coming back. It's like, well, yeah, no, that's not, yeah, sure. That's not the point, though. Like, the point isn't that they're going to return to the status quo. The point is what it takes to get there.
Yep.
And that's, so I'm not saying that everybody, that the dissenters are doing that specifically, but I do think that there are some people who look at it that way, and that bugs me, because it's just like, well, if you know how things are going to turn out to the status quo, then why are you watching the show? Like, it's that's the kind of thing that always bugs me, though.
It's a criticism that can be levied against all of them. I guess. Yeah, it's you have to kind of be clever in when you're producing a show like this, is that writing to the ending that you have to get to has to work outside of just feeling like you're doing it to get there. I think that potentially this episode falters a little bit there, where it doesn't do a good enough job avoiding that pitfall potentially. So that's it. That's all the Tuvixes. There were 43 references to Tuvix.
We didn't get any comments from Tuvix Must Die?
No, we didn't. Is there Tuvix Must Die in the... No.
We, for a very long time, had a patron named Tuvix Must Die.
We did. I was trying to think if he's on the Discord. I don't think he is. He or she or... No. Tuvix Must Die missed that whole raison d'etre, I guess.
Didn't even stick it out.
He's gonna wake up.
Made it to that 39th rotisserie chicken and just couldn't do the 40th.
Let me see if Tuvix Must Die is still here.
Oh, man, we're going to blow up that dude's spot right now.
Yeah, still here. Still with us. Tuvix Must Die, we appreciate your support very much. One of our captain patrons, too. Because I was saying the name. I guess that makes sense. Well, we look forward to your response about whether or not Tuvix had to die, because it's unclear based on your name what you think about this. That's it. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for supporting the show at patreon.com/the Pensky File. We greatly appreciate your business, and we appreciate you listening to all the shows. So, Clay, on a scale of 1 to 5, what are you going to give this one? Patrons liked it, generally.
Yeah, I'm going with a 5 on this one.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like... of the handful of Voyager episodes that I would actively say you need to watch it, this is definitely in that list. So
yeah, it's been a long podcast. It gave us a lot to talk about.
Yeah,
I think it's a 5 too. It's a flawed 5, I guess.
Sure,
would be my way of saying it. I wish it was perfect, but I think that its flaws are actually kind of interesting too, in a way.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I'm going to give it a 5. I think that it's probably going to end up on one of the, when this is all said and done, it's probably going to be in the top 10 of Voyager episodes, I would say, have to be seen. And generally in a positive way for this one. So 2 5s for us, for Tuvix. We'll combine them into 1 1. And that'll be the average for the rest of the season. Cool. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. Clay, do you have anything you want to say before we get the hell out of here?
Badass is back. We are into season 2 of Batman Beyond. Our first episode, we did a bit of a tribute for Kevin Conroy. So if you're interested in that, and if you do listen to that, make sure you listen all the way to the end, because at the end we put in the cameo, the audio from the cameo that Sean got given to him from.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, where Conroy reads some of Sean's dialogue from Batman White Knight. So it's a nice little episode, and it's a bummer way to start the season, but it is what it is. And rounding out Rotten Horror Picture Show Patreon, second string of Stephen King. December is our final with 1990s Stephen King's It, with starring Steve Curry. Starring Steph Curry.
Steph Curry. He's just launching threes.
just passing the rock behind his back out through the sewer drain. With Stephen King's It with Tim Curry, and we're going to be doing Video Nasties next year, so that should be fun.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you for.
I can't wait to watch multiple movies about rape.
Yeah. Or it might just be implied or something. If you're living up to the British Censor Board, maybe it's something untoward.
That's why they got banned and prosecuted, because it very much was not implied.
Oh, just
it was explicitly shown.
Oh, that's too bad.
In more than one of the movies on the list, it's just like it's one of those things where a lot of these movies, while there are many of them that were unfairly targeted.
Yeah.
The thing that kind of like binds them all together, I mean, they're all unfairly targeted. You shouldn't be making movies illegal. But the thing that kind of binds them all together is they're all essentially exploitation movies. Yeah. And so they are trying to push buttons and make things as shocking as possible. And at the time, at least, that usually equated to explicit gore and explicit sexual violence. So.
Yep. No human centipede on there. Human centipede.
No, unfortunately, that was 30 years later.
Me and Amy always laugh about the South Park human centipede episode. That always makes us.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Do you choose the cuttlefish or the vanilla paste? Vanilla paste. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Next episode, I guess, is resolutions, but we'll see. Maybe Memory Alpha is out of order. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the podcast. We'll see you next time.